Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Thanks for tuning in to the VCAP FY21 webinar. My name is Christina Claren, and I'm one of the Urban Conservation Specialists here at the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District. To help moderate, my coworker Ashley Palmer will also be fielding the chat box and is available to answer questions if needed. Before we go ahead and get started, I just wanted to go over a couple of house rules. I did want to make you all aware that this meeting is being recorded so that we can go ahead and post it on our website so that you could view it later or send it to neighbors, friends, clients, whoever. So if you feel like you missed a particular section or you need to go back and revisit something, we should have this recording on the website, hopefully before the end of this week. If you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat box. If it's something that's directly applicable to something that we're talking about, I'll go ahead and answer it on the fly. If not, I will likely be responding to all questions at the end of the webinar, just so we can keep a nice flow for the recorded presentation. Last reminder, we have disabled all cameras and microphones, but sometimes you are, however it happens, sometimes you can accidentally unmute yourself. Just please be aware of whether or not you are muted during the entire presentation. We'll also be actively looking and making sure that everybody is, by turning off cameras or turning off microphones. So it would be a super help if you guys could help us moderate that and just keep them off in general. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and move into today's presentation. So today's presentation will cover the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program and what it looks like for the Northern Virginia Soil and Water District in FY21. So we run this program by the start and end of our fiscal year. So our fiscal year started on July 1st. So it is the beginning of what we call our new program year. During this presentation, I'm just going to go ahead and give a quick background on what VCAP is, sort of what VCAP looks like in our district area thus far, and then I'll go in depth on how to submit a site visit request application that you can find on our VCAP page on our website, and you could also find it if you received it in email. It was also linked to that email as well. So I'm going to go through in depth how to fill that out and highlight some of the changes with the program and the application form, just so that everybody has all of that information. So just to start, the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program is a technical and financial assistance program for stormwater BMPs, or best management practices. The way that VCAP is intended to be used, it's a voluntary program. So if you are building new development, or if you are doing any sort of ground moving activity on your property and the county finds you in some sort of violation, meaning that you have to either correct the violation or install a stormwater management practice as a result of development or ground moving activities. Unfortunately, VCAP cannot cover those sorts of instances. But what it can cover is if you have any sort of drainage and erosion issue that you would like to voluntarily address on your property, our projects and project types could potentially help with those sorts of issues. We really want to emphasize the water quality benefit with VCAP, meaning that all of our projects are meant to receive water and infiltrate them into the ground if possible. We also aim to engage local private property owners in water quality protection on their land through addressing what I mentioned before, these common drainage and erosion concerns. Through all the soil and water conservation districts across the state of Virginia. It's managed by our state association, so the Virginia Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts. They create a lot of the blanket regulations and policies and some of the other larger programmatic items, such as our BMP manual, but it is up to the local district to create and implement their own program as they see fit for the residents of their county. Sometimes people will cross county boundaries. So for the Northern Virginia Soil and Water District, we cover everything within Fairfax County. We also cover the city of Fairfax and the city of Alexandria. Sometimes we do get people, since we are so close to Prince William County and Loudoun County, we do get some people from those areas that reach out to us regarding VCAP. And if you know somebody that lives in those areas and is interested in VCAP, we do highly encourage you to reach out to your local soil and water conservation district, because like I mentioned, each district runs this program a little bit differently. So it's always best to make sure that you're communicating with the right soil and water district before, really delving deep into VCAP. One of the things that I do want to mention about all of our projects is that there is a 10-year maintenance agreement for everything. This basically means that you do need to maintain this project for a period of 10 years. And there are some ways to get out of that if something happens. If, let's say, you have to move after a certain amount of time, there are forms you can fill out, and we can get into a little bit of those details later on in the presentation. So just to give you guys a snapshot of how VCAP looks like within our district, thus far we have about 151 projects approved for installation. So VCAP is extremely popular within our service area boundaries. Since 2015, we've awarded $400,000 plus in just cost share alone. Provided to eligible applicants within our service area. We also have a couple of award-winning projects recognized by the Chesapeake Stormwater Network and also recognized by our state association. So we have a lot of really good work happening across Fairfax County and City of Fairfax in this Alexandria when it comes to VCAP. Since the program inception, we've also conducted over 350 individual site visits. This number doesn't include site visits where we might have to go out, more than once. If there's certain site constraints or site conditions that we need to be aware of with a particular site. So all of this is to say that the interest in VCAP in Fairfax County is there. So as such, it does tend to be a quite competitive program. But I'm hoping that some of the information we discussed in this webinar today can help bring all of you guys to a site visit application and hopefully a project. So I just wanted to give you guys an example of a VCAP project that we had installed previously. So this homeowner is located in Falls Church, and she installed a rain garden, some really nice conservation landscaping, and also had a dry well on her property. And this is just a picture before, so like right after installation of that initial project. And then this is just a picture when I went out for a spot check inspection last summer. So this person's property is thriving with all of the native plants. Homeowner is still extremely happy with the projects. They're all working as intended. So these are sort of the success stories that we like to see with the program. So I keep mentioning project types and reimbursement rates for VCAP. So I just wanted to give you guys an idea of the types of projects we are looking for in terms of being eligible for VCAP cost share. So our most popular practice type is called conservation landscaping. And what conservation landscaping is just landscaping with Virginia native plants, so plants that are commonly found within our region. And like I mentioned before, all of these projects will have a lifespan of 10 years. And for most reimbursement rates on all of our projects, we will reimburse 75% of the eligible project costs up to a certain amount. So for conservation landscaping, that reimbursement rate looks like 75% of eligible project costs up to $3,500. We also have cost share reimbursement for rain gardens, dry wells, constructed wetlands. We also do impervious surface removal, vegetated stormwater conveyance, rainwater harvesting, permeable pavement, bioretentions, which are just sort of the big brother rain gardens, so a lot larger than your average homeowner rain garden. Infiltration practices, also known as infiltration trenches, green roofs, and also living shorelines. So like I mentioned before, we do cover 75% of eligible project costs up to a certain amount. But I do want to bring your attention to a couple of the projects where it is not 75%. And those are going to be impervious surface removal, which is reimbursed at $2.50 per square foot up to $10,000. Rainwater harvesting is only reimbursed per gallon of treated volume at $2 per gallon of treated volume. In permeable pavement, we only reimburse $3 per square foot of impervious area treated. So basically what this means is if you are interested in a permeable pavement project, we are looking at a reimbursement rate of the entire square footage of your existing patio or driveway. Most commonly, people will be interested in permeable pavement for their driveway. So whatever the footprint of your driveway is, times 3 is what your reimbursement rate will look like. And if you're able to tie in any downspouts or other direct sources of water, you could potentially receive more cost share reimbursement if it's coming from an impervious surface. So like I just mentioned, runoff from downspouts right off of the home, that counts as impervious area treated, and we will factor in that square footage into the reimbursement rate if that is the case. And then the last project that has sort of a different reimbursement scenario are green roofs, and we reimburse those at $10 per square foot up to $15,000. We haven't received any green roof applications within Fairfax County or our other service areas, so we're definitely always on the look for some of these newer projects. We've also never received a constructed wetland project application within our county, so if you are interested in any of those projects, definitely let us know, and we can, we can see what we can do. We can see what we can help out with. So I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that VCAP is intended to treat drainage and erosion issues, and the way that our state association sort of categorizes these issues as are called resource concerns. So within VCAP, you can apply for a project with one of 3 resource concerns, with erosion, poor vegetative cover, or excess runoff. Excess runoff could be anything from excess turf runoff. So if you have a compacted turf lawn, we can definitely count that as excess runoff. If you get excess runoff from the road, if you live downhill from a neighbor and you're getting excess runoff from maybe their rooftop or their property, that can be counted within excess runoff. Poor vegetated cover, typically see this. One common situation that we always see is erosion on maybe a sloped area. So people will reach out to us if they have poor vegetative cover there. If there's any shady part of a lawn, a lot of the times, where turf grass won't grow, that tends to be poorly vegetated. And then the last one, erosion, which is probably the most popular resource concern that people reach out to us for, could be caused by a variety of different sources, but it would really constitute a site visit or some good pictures to determine whether a VCAP project would be appropriate for for your erosion issue. So this chart here is just taken out of our VCAP manual, which is available online. And what it basically shows is just the 3 resource concerns that we just talked about. So erosion, poor cover, and excess runoff, and the appropriate project to help address that. So these NAs just mean that that particular project cannot address or typically cannot adequately address what that resource concern is, and the check marks represent the projects that would help accurately or adequately address those resource concerns. So for example, if you have poor cover, all of these conservation landscaping projects would be an appropriate an appropriate solution for that. But if you had poor cover, and let's say you were looking at installing maybe a rain garden, that might not adequately address the problem. But we can always talk. This chart is only meant as a guidance, but if a lot of the times, if you're working with a landscape designer or a contractor and they have an idea, we're definitely open to hearing, what those ideas are. So if you see a project type and you're a landscape designer or your contractor or yourself even thinks that it might adequately address the situation, definitely reach out to us. It's always worth talking about, and we can sort of give you some technical guidance in regards to a project type and whether or not it'll help alleviate whatever resource concern you are experiencing. So this is the part of the presentation where I'm going to switch gears here and go over the site visit request form. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen real quick. And I'm going to move towards sharing. Here we go. All right.
Christina, in reference to specific practices, we had a couple of questions come in regarding green roofs, and is there a minimum size for those?
Okay.
And then another question about the difference
Yes.
between bioretention and infiltration.
Sure. So there is a minimum size for green roofs. We actually did revise that number this year, but you can find that that number in the VCAP manual. So you can either email me, or you could just go to Google and type in VCAP BMP manual, and it'll link you to the actual manual for VCAP, and the number will be in there somewhere. And then the difference between bioretention and infiltration. So both of these projects are intended to infiltrate excess runoff. Typically, bioretentions have a vegetated component to it, whereas an infiltration practice or an infiltration trench typically might not have any sort of vegetation associated with it. So for example, one popular project that people like to do with their program, if they're not interested in sort of upkeeping with vegetation, is they'll install either a dry well or an infiltration trench, because you can typically just leave that in gravel at the top, or you can turf over it or put gravel, or like I mentioned, gravel over it. It just depends on sort of like what your needs are and sort of what you would like to maintain, essentially. So thanks, Ashley. Okay, so if you received the email when the VCAP program opened, this is the form that should have been linked into it. It can also be found on our website. And this is sort of just what it looks like just right off the bat. Up top, one thing I'd like to bring everybody's attention to is that we review the requests after the site visit request period ends, and we select up to 50 individuals who will be granted a site visit and given an opportunity to apply for the program. So the reason why we do this process this way is because we do want to make sure that everybody across our service areas does have an opportunity to apply for the program, because it is very generous cost share reimbursement for these projects, and we just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to take advantage of the cost share funding and the assistance that is out there. So with that being said, I'm just going to go through some of the entire application in full. And if anybody has any questions, again, you can utilize that chat box and we can address that afterwards. So just to start, contact information for landowners and decision makers. Typically, if this is a homeowner, it'll just be them or maybe their spouse or whoever they own the home with. Sometimes if this is an HOA or a place of worship in the city of Alexandria or city of Fairfax. Sometimes those entities will have landscape committees, and you'll just go ahead and enter in whoever those decision makers are, all of their information here. So I'll just go ahead and enter my name here just to show you guys how it all works. Just put in our office phone number here, and then email. All right, so the address of the areas in question. Again, if you are an individual homeowner, you can just put your address. Sometimes if you are located within an HOA, you'll have multiple areas of concern. So whichever situation you fall under, it's really important to put those multiple addresses if it is indeed one of those situations where you're going to have more than one area of concern. So let's just say that I'm a homeowner and I just have one area of concern. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in my home address. It's not my actual home address. But for demonstration purposes, we'll just put our office address. And then if you're contacting us on behalf of an HOA or place of worship, you can just go ahead and type in yes or no here. So I'm going to put no. So if you are aware of any easements in the tentative project location, for example, sometimes you might have a stormwater easement either along the side of your property or in your backyard or any sort of other easements. Sometimes, you might have like trail easements adjacent or near your location. You can go ahead and put whether or not you have those here. If you're unsure, that's fine. You could also put no, not that I know of, but unsure. We always go ahead and check your address or the addresses of concerns for any potential easements anyways. So this is just, this question is just nice to know. If you do know off the top of your head, but if you don't, totally fine. It's something we double check anyways. This statement here, I understand that projects may not begin until I've received funding approval with an approval date sometime in the spring or fall of 2021. That's really important to note. A lot of the times people will seek our assistance and want to install a project, right away, like maybe that weekend. VCAP, I always tell people VCAP is not the sprint, it's more like a marathon. So if you have an issue and you're willing to wait for potential cost share funding, this is definitely the program for you. If you're more interested in sort of receiving the technical advice and sort of doing it on your own, like on your own time, it's completely fine too. VCAP is probably not well suited for you at that point then, but we would be happy to send you resources to help you, install whatever project you're interested in installing or give you any resources, for whatever your drainage and erosion concern is. So this is really important. It's also important to know that even though if you get chosen for a site visit, you don't have permission to start right away. You do have to wait for, there is another application process after this site visit request because this is just the site visit request application. There is a full official VCAP application that a staff member will give you, depending on whoever is doing your site visit. After the fact. So again, VCAP is the marathon, not the sprint. So the next information is just going to be just some geographic information just to get a better idea in our service area. So for supervisor district or jurisdiction, if you click this little drop-down menu, it'll list all of the supervisor districts within Fairfax County. But we also have City of Fairfax in here and City of Alexandria. So if you fall within those associated municipalities, go ahead and click that. And then, right, this next question asks what watershed you're in. So you can click the drop-down menu and you'll find all of the watersheds in Fairfax County. A common question that I get a lot of the times, people are like, I have no idea what watershed I'm located in. How do I find that out? So I'm going to quickly switch screens here and show you guys how to find your watershed. So I'm going to show you guys how to find, so if you don't know how to find your supervisor district or you're unsure, I'll show you guys how to find that, your watershed, and whether or not you're located in resource protection area. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this and share my other screen. Okay, so when you click on those links to find the watershed and resource protection area information in the site visit request form, it'll take you to this map, this mapping software. So this is one way to figure out all of this information, but I will also show you another way to find it out where you can also find your supervisor district. So it's really easy to use. If you want to view it in a larger screen, you can click here to view the map in full screen. But what we're interested in doing is doing our address search. So if you are located in the city of Alexandria or the city of Fairfax, the mapping software will be very similar. I believe the city of Fairfax has a really good one that I linked in the application as well. If you're located in the city of Alexandria, they basically just have a pretty large map, and then you can just find where your parcel is on that map and then put which watershed you're located in there. So, but if you're in Fairfax County, any Fairfax County address will come up here. So I'm going to go ahead and type in my address here. And sometimes it'll pop up. It's kind of a good way to know that things are going as intended. So click on your address, and you will see here that difficult run, that is where this particular building's address is located in. If you have resource protection area on site, you'll usually see this little green hatched line over your parcel, and you can go ahead and just click yes or no. If you don't see it, then you can click no. If you do see it, and if it does potentially have an impact on where your project location is, we definitely need to know what that is, or and where that is, sure that we are filling out the appropriate waivers for these sorts of projects. Another way to sort of find out this information, this is a public mapping software that's available to all residents of Fairfax County. It's called JADE. The link to JADE is really messy, so if you Google or use a search engine to find it, if you just Google Fairfax County map JADE, it'll be the first one that pops up, and when you click on that link, it'll take you to this page. So it works very similarly to the Find Your Watershed tool that we just looked at, but it'll give you a little bit more information. So over here on the right-hand side where my cursor is, you'll go ahead and enter in your address again and hit enter. And then so it did find that address point. So we're going to go ahead and click and zoom in on that address point. So you'll see sort of this big blue circle here where that area is located. So let's say that you are unsure where your supervisor district is. You can go up here to this toolbar. So where it says basic tools, reports, and searches, you're going to go to the reports button. And when you hit the reports button, you'll hover over to this little icon here to the left that says general parcel report. So it's going to generate some general information about your parcel that you can access on any database. So once you click it, it's going to prompt you to select a parcel to choose a parcel report for. So you're going to go ahead and click that. And then what will happen is it'll bring you to this parcel report where you can then find your supervisor district. Again, you can also do this for some environmental information too. So you've got your general parcel report, and then you have your environmental parcel report, which you can use some of the information here to fill out the rest of the site visit request application. So I'm just going to go ahead and create the environmental parcel report as well. because these do just take a second to come up. So once that general parcel report does come up, you can then find your supervisor district on this report here. So this particular address that I typed in is located in the Braddock district. And then you'll also find some other information regarding the parcel as well. But the only thing that we are interested for our purposes is just the supervisor district. So under supervisor district, if you're filling this out, it's this first line item here, and then I would put Braddock on my site visit request form. So moving to the, the environmental parcel report, you'll also be able to find the watershed information. So for here, for some reason, it lists 2 watersheds, which means that this particular parcel is probably located in an area where those 2 might, could be in Cub Run, a little bit in Cub Run, and then maybe mostly in Difficult Run. If you run into that situation, you can always just put one or the other. Again, we always double check it anyways, so a best guess is completely fine here. And then not located in a floodplain. This is also something that'll be important to know as well, depending on the location of your project. But this is the other important part that we want to be aware of too, is the resource protection area. So it'll say yes or no. And then if it is yes, it'll tell you approximately how many square feet of resource protection is located on the property. And again, that is something that we will definitely need to know if you do have resource protection area on your property, because there are some waivers and some processes that you might have to go through in terms of, for example, if you wanted to replace non-native vegetation located in a resource protection area with native vegetation, that'll just be a quick waiver to Fairfax County to let them know that you will be doing work in an RPA. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and switch back to our site visit request form. So from our parcel reports, I just found out that my supervisor district is the Braddock district and located in the Difficult Run watershed. It looks like there was a little bit of resource protection area on site. So we go ahead and clicked yes for that. Another question is whether or not your property is adjacent to parkland. Sometimes people will just know that their property backs up to parkland. For example, we have had some projects where people were backed up to Burke Lake Park. So that's just something we need to know, because we need to make sure that any project we do isn't encroaching on parkland. If you're unsure whether or not your property is adjacent to parkland, if you do go to Jade or use any of those mapping softwares, a lot of the times it'll be demarcated where your parcel ends, and then it'll also, like mentioned, have the name of the park on the other side of the parcel. Those are just some ways to sort of keep an eye out on whether or not parkland is adjacent to your property. So for our purposes, we were not located next to parkland. So the next question is where the location of your potential project might be: the front yard, the side yard, or the backyard. And this just gives us a better idea of what we should be looking for map-wise. So for our purposes, let's just say this project is going to go in our front yard. And then you also have to identify your resource concern. So we mentioned earlier that there are a couple of resource concerns, such as erosion, impervious runoff, poor vegetative cover, or turf runoff and compacted soil. You can check all that apply. It's more helpful to know if you only have one or the other, but a lot of the times, we are coming out anyways to identify, where the source of the runoff or where the problem is originating. So if you're unsure, best guess is completely fine here. So let's just say that I'm dealing with some poor vegetative cover, but I'm also dealing with some erosion. Those are 2 completely acceptable things to check. So this next section, we just want to have a short narrative of what you're describing what's happening on your property. If this box is too small for you, you can feel free to send a Word document sort of as an addendum to this site visit request, and we'll save that with your site visit request application. This box does scroll, so whatever makes you feel comfortable. A lot of the times this actual document requires a signature at the end. Sometimes people aren't comfortable with electronically signing. And if that is the case, and you have a really long narrative that you are including on your site visit request form, that sending it in a separate Word document might actually be better for you. So if you are going to send it in a separate document, you could just say something like sending in a separate Word document, and then we will go ahead and make sure we have that information. So here, we want you to select only 3 project types that you're interested in, so that we can better narrow down, sort of what the markers are we should be looking at anytime that we look up your parcel. So if you would like a better description of what these project types are, you could always go to our state association webpage, and they actually have a really good webpage where they have all the project types, and they have some short information about what each of those project types are, and they also have a couple of pictures to go along with it. So that's a really helpful resource to use, and I highly encourage using that. So for our purposes, since I selected erosion and poor vegetative cover as my resource concerns, I'm going to go ahead and choose conservation landscaping, maybe a rain garden, and maybe a dry well as those 3 interested project types I had. So go ahead and move on to the next question. So sometimes our staff has been in touch with some of the people that are interested in VCAP, whether through, meetings in the community, or maybe they've talked via email or on the phone regarding something. We just want to know if any of our staff has been involved with you or your property before, because that'll also give us a better idea sort of what to look for. And sometimes if a staff member's already been out, that's a really good thing to know, because then I can just go to that staff member and be like, hey, what's going on John Smith's property? And do you think VCAP would be a good fit for them? So it just helps us keep the lines of communication open between staff, and it also helps us not to start from scratch when reading your site visit application, so that we can get a better idea of what's going on. So a lot of the times, if we want to know whether or not your project will be used as a demonstration site or in cooperation with another group, we have a lot of master gardeners or master naturalists who are interested in VCAP and are interested in sort of creating, backyard habitat with conservation landscaping, or be a showcase for sustainable stormwater management. We'd like to know that. So if you are a master gardener who is working with other master gardeners or other master naturalists, working with other members, or even if you are a nonprofit, we've had some nonprofit groups install projects before. We've had schools install projects before. We want to know that. So you can, when you go ahead and click yes, you're going to insert whatever group name that is. So let's just say, like, yes, I am interested, or I will be working with another group, and let's just say I'm a master gardener. So I will go ahead and put that there. A lot of the times, neighbors will apply for site visit requests to sort of address a shared stormwater issue or drainage and erosion issue that they're experiencing. So we want to keep that, or take that into account when reviewing site visit requests. So if you are working with a neighbor, you can go ahead and click yes and insert their name, so we can sort of link your 2 site visit request applications. But if not, just go ahead and click no, and then we can move on. So for our next question, we have an annual sustainable garden tour every year that our agency hosts, which actually we went virtual this year. So if you're interested in seeing some fantastic VCAP projects, you can go ahead and go on our website and just look for the Sustainable Garden Tour tab, and you'll find a plethora of videos, slideshows, and some other resources to help you, to help guide you through some of our previous VCAP projects. So if you're interested in being on that sustainable garden tour at some point, you can click yes. If you click no, that's totally fine. Some people, just aren't interested in having people potentially coming to their property, and that's totally okay. But if you are willing to participate, we'd love to have you. This past year, I want to say that maybe half of our sustainable garden tour sites all had participated in our program. So, it is a very popular thing that people do choose to participate in, and we'd love to have you guys if you're interested. So the next thing that's really important for the site visit request form that is new this year is we want you to take pictures of the affected area and send it along with your site visit request application and your typed out narrative, if you decide to type it in a Word document, to along with the site visit request application to Conservation District at fairfaxcounty.gov. The easiest way to do this is to submit a Word or one PDF file with the narrative and all of the pictures. But if you want to send, that's completely fine. And sending multiple emails is also completely fine. We do ask that you not send Google Drive links or other Drive links such as OneDrive or Dropbox or, the Apple Cloud or iCloud. Unfortunately, we can't access those files through Fairfax County issued computers, so it does make it a little hard to download these items. So if you feel like you are sending too many pictures or too many files at once, don't. It's completely fine. We'd rather you send multiple files than sending us a Drive link. So just please keep that in mind. I personally think that doing the Word document approach and then inserting the pictures into the Word document along with your narrative is probably the easiest way because you only have to send one file. But if you have any issues, just let us know, and we can help walk you through that. So this next section is just soils information, but the staff will go ahead and look up that information and just put it down in this area. So you don't have to worry about that section. So the last section is the funnest section of the entire site visit request form. It's basically just an acknowledgement section, and to sort of inform you on some of the important policies and regulations within the VCAP program, sort of just like a last effort to ensure that, one, you are in fact eligible to participate in VCAP if you are chosen, and then just some other really important things that you need to be aware of when applying for VCAP in general. So I'm not going to read this verbatim for all of you, but there are a couple of things that I do want to point out that have disqualified people in the past from participating in VCAP, and we just want to make sure that you don't do all of this hard work just to be told, no, you're ineligible. So like I mentioned, VCAP is a voluntary program, so you can't be interested in installing a VCAP project to correct a violation of any sort on your property. If you are found to be in non-compliance with this policy, and let's say for whatever reason it slips through the crack and then it's brought up to me or another staff member or maybe even our executive director that this property was in fact or did in fact use a VCAP project to correct a violation, you will be responsible for repaying back the entire cost share amount. So just keep that in mind. A lot of the times people are not unaware that they're in violation. So that's not something to worry about unless, like I mentioned, people aren't unaware of the violation. They usually get some sort of mail from Fairfax County if they happen to be fall into that category. Another really important thing I want to point out is that projects can't be installed to treat runoff from structures that are less than 3 years old. So sometimes people will build new sheds, sometimes people will build new additions or extend a driveway. And that's awesome, but we can't treat any runoff or drainage and erosion issues as a result of that construction. So we ask that if you are applying for a site visit, because you are experiencing a runoff issue due to some new construction, we have other resources that you could use, but VCAP would not be the appropriate resource to use for that specific situation. Again, all projects come with a 10-year maintenance agreement. And if you are approved, there is a form that you sign stating that you understand this maintenance responsibility. So every single year, we do spot check inspections. We have to inspect 25% of our project inventory. And then I just select a random 25% of all of our projects to inspect every year. And I definitely notify applicants or project applicants, with at least 3 to 4 weeks in advance, so that if you feel the need to clean up before I come out and inspect, that's completely fine. But you are bound to a 10-year maintenance agreement, and we just really want to let people know that right up front. Another thing that I do want people to understand is that VCAP is a grant-based program, and the submission of an application does not guarantee funding approval. So VCAP as a whole is funded by what we call soft money, and that money really just depends on the grants that we apply for, funding availability, and a multitude of other things. So even if you submit a project application, it doesn't guarantee that you'll be funded in a timely manner, and it also doesn't guarantee that you'll be funded at all. So please just keep that in mind. Again, VCAP is a marathon, not a sprint. And, even with that sort of restriction, or I guess caveat to the program, we still do get a lot of interest in participating. So I do highly encourage you to still participate, knowing that it doesn't guarantee funding approval, because, a lot of people do still get chosen, but we just can't ever say with 100% certainty that yes, you will be funded. One thing that we look for on site visit requests, there are some benchmark things that we look for, such as resource concerns, location of the project, and whether or not we think it'll rank highly. So official project applications are ranked and scored per a ranking criteria that the state association has created. And any project that receives a score below 75 points, so this is not the site visit request application that we are looking at right now. This is the official project application if you get chosen for a site visit request. It can't be below 75 points because it won't be considered for a potential project approval. I will say, if you do get chosen for a site visit, we have put in place some sort of pre-screening criteria. So this site visit request application is one way that we do some pre-screening to make sure that projects rank highly. We haven't had ever since moving to this process, I will say that we haven't had any project score below a 75 once it reaches official project application phase. And if it has, there were things that we could do, such as, maybe switching up the plant list, or, increasing project size. There were things that we could have done to increase that. So I do feel confident, and our staff feels confident, that if you do make it to the official project phase, you're not going to be shocked to find out that your project doesn't score high enough. So there's a lot of things we put into place to make sure that our applications score pretty highly. One thing that a lot of people that we've seen in the past couple of years is that sometimes landscape contractors might charge VCAP preparation fees. So sometimes people will offer to, put together the application for you, and that's awesome. But just know that we can't reimburse those fees. Other fees that we can't reimburse permit fees, unfortunately. And any other fees that might be associated with your project. So just keep that in mind. As we move through the project phases, we'll also let you know if there are any other things that might not be eligible for reimbursement. For example, for conservation landscaping project, we typically don't reimburse for hardscape. We typically don't reimburse for hardscaping in general unless it's a part of the project as a whole. So for example, we will reimburse for hardscaping and permeable pavement because that is part of the project. But for hardscaping, with say conservation landscaping, probably wouldn't be an eligible project reimbursement cost. So just be aware of that. The last thing to do on this site visit request application is to print your name and sign it. If you don't sign it, our lovely office manager will mail you back and ask you to sign it. If you're not comfortable with signing it electronically, we will go ahead and, or you can go ahead and print out the entire site visit request application form, sign it, and then scan it back in and send it to us. You can mail it to us if you would like. Mailing is not the preferred way of receiving site visit request applications, but we will accept them, if you are having some computer issues or you're just not comfortable sending a signed electronic copy. So there are some ways to get around that as well. So that brings me to the end of the site visit request form. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at some of the questions in the chat box. I see that there are a couple of questions that were answered by staff. So thank you, staff, for helping to field some of those. There's a link to Jade, the Jade mapping application that I mentioned. So please check that out if you haven't already. Somebody asked, can private property owners apply for more than 2 practices? And yes, you can. However, a new policy this year, it was a policy last year, but we sort of made it more clear this year, is that those 2 projects have to be addressing 2 different resource concerns. So sometimes if you have a large property and you have a contractor come out and they might suggest something called a treatment train. Where they might suggest do a rain garden here and then have an overflow from a rain garden go into a dry well and then overflow from a dry well going into conservation landscaping. Those are effective ways of treating stormwater runoff, but for our program purposes, because we do try to match projects with resource concerns, if you do apply for more than 1 project, you do have to be addressing 2 separate resource concerns.
Hey, Christina?
Yes.
This is Dan. I've answered quite a few, but I've got a few that I have not been able to answer yet, so I can read those out to you if you don't mind, so you don't have to read through the whole list.
That would be really helpful. Thanks, Dan. So what's a question that you haven't answered yet?
There was a question from Laura, and she said, to clarify, if your project is approved, you will get funding, right?
So no, that was if. So I think what this question is asking, if you submit an application, that we can say your project will be approved. It's not guaranteed. So there's a couple of things that you do have to meet for project approval. 1, your project application has to reach that minimum scoring threshold of 75. Like I mentioned, we work with you to help you get your application score higher if we can. In some cases, and we haven't had this quite yet, but in some cases, if we can't, then we'll let you know. But we do a lot of pre-screening to make sure that once you get to that official application phase, your project will be good to go. Another thing is, since we are a grant-funded program, the funds do vary by availability month to month. I will say this upcoming year, because of COVID and the pandemic, every program that is grant funded and every agency that depends on any grant funding, not just VCAP, we could see a little bit of a tighter year in terms of grant funding. So I do want to just put that out there. Getting funded in a timely manner, unsure, but we can't ever say with 100% certainty that you will be funded because there's just a lot of external factors that play into that.
Okay, thanks. And the next question is, if the runoff if our runoff problem from uphill, as well as our poor vegetation problem, predates an addition we put onto our house, would that still be eligible for VCAP funding? So it sounds like they have an existing problem. They also have a new addition, but if the problem pre-exists the addition, would it be eligible?
That might just be something that we would need to look at a map of to determine water flow, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but that seems like a very site-specific thing that we probably would just need to, take a look at some maps and take a look at the site to see if we could determine that. My first instinct, and I also know just from a review perspective, from the state steering committee, people might look at that and be like, oh, it's treating this runoff from this new addition. But, if the water patterns and the maps support it, we can, mention that, but have like a really good narrative to support that as to why it's not treating the new additions runoff. But again, couldn't say, with 100% certainty. That would really have to be like something we look at on site.
Yeah, I think it's probably the right answers. We'd have to take a peek at it because there's so much variability from site to site.
Yeah.
We have, I think, a two-part question here. The first part is, do you reimburse landscape design fees? Sorry, not a two-part question. Do you reimburse, for example, if I want to build retention walls for bioretention, is that considered hardscaping? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm reading two different. What is considered hardscaping? For example, if I want to build retention walls for bioretention, is that hardscaping?
So I think in terms of reimbursing for hardscaping, it would really depend on whether or not that hardscaping is vital to the performance of that project. So, I don't know the whole situation, in depth, but if you needed to build a retention wall for your bioretention because the bioretention's function depends on having that retention wall, and if that was the case, then we could definitely look at reimbursing something like that. The hardscaping that I'm thinking of is just decorative hardscaping. So a lot of the times, people with conservation landscaping will sometimes ask if they can include like decorative boulders within their landscape or their project costs. And I always tell people you can definitely include it somewhat into your project if you want. We just won't reimburse for it. So I guess shorter, more concise answer, yes, we will reimburse hardscaping if it's vital to the project. If it's not vital to the project or for a decorative purpose, we will not.
Okay, thanks. And another similar type of question, do you reimburse landscape design fees?
So yes, we do reimburse landscape design fees. I will say that sometimes you do have to pay those fees up front. So just go into that, with that mindset. Sometimes people and contractors and landscape designers will also charge for that initial site visit up front too. So for those fees, we don't reimburse, but for the landscape design fees, we do. Because do keep in mind that when you ask a contractor to come out to your site, that is their work, that is their livelihood, that's how they make their money. So we do want to make sure that all of our participants are aware that when you ask a company to come out to your property, that there will likely be a fee rolled into that. Now, sometimes if they do the site visit and you do have to pay for that, and you do end up going with their, with their design or their contract, sometimes they will roll that fee into the overall project costs, but not everybody does that. So you do want to make sure you do your research and go in with it knowing which things you will have to pay for upfront and what you won't.
I'd add to that too, if you are a designer yourself, if you wanted to roll your fee into the total project cost, of course, as Christina just said, you can do that, but there's always that small chance that your project won't get funded by VCAP. And if it doesn't, maybe the homeowner won't want to proceed. So you do have to use that option with caution, because if you're rolling it into the project price, VCAP doesn't fund it, you don't go on with the project, you've basically done free design work for somebody. So be careful about that.
Yeah, so yeah, always make sure you know what you'll need to pay for and what you won't need to pay for up front, because that just protects you. It also protects, the landscape professionals in our community that are working. We just want to make sure everybody knows what fees they will need up front. So.
Another question here: if a homeowner wishes to replace a failing long asphalt driveway and replace it with a permeable one, does that mean one applies for both impervious surface removal and permeable pavement replacement?
This is an excellent question. And no, you do not qualify for both of them. So if you are installing permeable pavement as a project type, impervious surface removal, like that is a required component of installing your permeable pavement driveway. So you cannot apply for both. Now, let's say you have two driveways and you want to do one permeable pavement, and then maybe you want to convert your other long driveway into, say, a veggie garden. You could then apply for impervious surface removal for that, to put in your veggie garden if you wanted to, or to return it to turf, or whatever you wanted to do with that area. But you can't apply for both for one driveway or one patio or whatever the case might be.
Another question: does VCAP reimburse for conveyance hardscaping, i.e. river rock swales? And I think this answer is pretty much the same one as what you gave for retaining walls. If it's integral to the design, basically if the conveyance, the river rock swale, is bringing water to a rain garden, infiltration trench, or something similar, yes. If it is an aesthetic part, just looks nice, it is separate from the functioning, it's not integral to the functioning of the system, then no. But if it's a conveyance to get water to a rain garden, an infiltration trench, or one of the other CAP projects, then yes.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Another question here: does VCAP have information on creating a conservation habitat for wildlife?
So we don't have specific information on how to do that, per se, but we do have some resources that we could point to you in the direction of. The Chesapeake Conservation Landscaping Council has a fantastic conservation landscaping sort of resource or handbook, and they do mention some stuff about creating wildlife habitat in that. The goal of VCAP is not to create wildlife habitat per se. We sort of see that as more of a I guess, secondary benefit to it, because up front, the sort of like our main objective is just to improve water quality in our local rivers and streams and in the Chesapeake Bay. But certainly, you can certainly address two issues with one project if you're interested in creating a wildlife habitat with native plants, and you also happen to be addressing a resource concern. I think those are sort of like the best type of project.
I think in addition to that, the Plant Nova Natives website also has some good sample planting plans for things like pollinator gardens and the like, if that's the type of wildlife you're trying to attract.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think I see only one other question we haven't answered. Someone asked if they could get a copy of the chat Q&A that we've typed up. Is that possible?
So probably the easiest way to do this is whenever we do post this webinar, maybe skip to like the last 10 to 15 minutes, and then all of those questions will be answered in that last 10 to 15 minutes. Because within the chat box, there's sort of there's a lot of back and forth between staff and some of the participants. So I think the best way to refer back to the questions would be to just listen to the last 10 to 15 minutes. And then somebody also mentioned the Audubon at Home website has some really great information on creating wildlife habitat. There's a ton of different resources out there, but those are some of the resources that we use commonly. So, great.
Somebody said we can copy and paste the chat into another document, so perhaps if we can figure that out, we might be able to send it out with the recorded link as well too.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. So we will work on getting that information posted on our website. But with that being said, I don't see any other questions. My contact email is up here. So christina.claren@fairfaxcounty.gov. I am the program coordinator for VCAP, so you can feel free to send me any site-specific questions. If you have any questions, lingering questions after this. If you are looking for an email address to send to your site visit request application to, we do ask that you send that to conservationdistrict@fairfaxcounty.gov, and that address is also going to be on the site visit request form. So with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. You all had some really awesome questions, and I hope to see some site visit request applications from all of you. So thanks.